You've probably heard of generative AI by now, a digital tool that has taken the workplace by storm, and a term that remains at the top of many professionals' minds today. Think back to the first time you heard about generative AI. What was your reaction to this idea of a technology that could create a variety of text, images, and audio in just a few seconds? And what thoughts were going through your mind when you considered the impact that this new technology could have on your work? Hi, I'm Jason Chen, a learning and leadership development researcher at McLean & Company. When I first heard about generative AI, my mind was filled with excitement. Like, wow, this has endless possibilities. However, like any big change in technology, there are questions and hesitancies that remain about its effectiveness, advancement, and predictability. That's why today in this Learning on Demand video, we'll tackle some of these questions. I'm going to refer to generative AI as Gen AI from now on, since it's less of a mouthful. We'll explore how Gen AI can be used in a way that is meaningful and effective for you, your role, and your organization, which starts with adopting the right mindset. When we think about Gen AI, it's important to keep in mind that it comes with both benefits and challenges. One of the greatest benefits of Gen AI is its ability to foster innovation. By generating new ideas and outputs, Gen AI can push you to consider different perspectives. And I think we can all agree that we face times in our work where we hit mental blocks and have trouble coming up with fresh outlooks. In these instances, you can think of Gen AI as a creative sidekick. It can encourage diverse ways of thinking, support you in exploring unique angles, and provide new and exciting insights. Just like a sidekick, however, Gen AI is no substitute for you and the work that you do. In fact, one of the main challenges with Gen AI is evaluating its outputs to ensure they are reliable and true. Like any content we consume, we need to carefully analyze these outputs to verify their accuracy and avoid falling into the trap of embedding misinformation in our work and worse, our decisions. This is because AI reflects the cognitive biases, preconceptions, and judgments of its creators and datasets. In simpler terms, Gen AI does not fact-check the sources that it pulls its data from to generate answers. Therefore, if the data is inaccurate or biased, the output will reflect this. Another thing that makes Gen AI challenging is that it is constantly changing. The rapid evolution in Gen AI technology requires a lot of new learning, which can put pressure on us to master it quickly or use it in a way that is irresponsible or ineffective. Gen AI requires careful judgment, trial and error, and out-of-the-box thinking to develop innovative use cases and generate the intended outputs. We need to use our critical thinking each time we are presented with a new Gen AI output. We know that Gen AI is fantastic at generating content quickly and efficiently, but it lacks the critical human thinking skills needed to validate and make meaning from that same content. AI is very smart, but it doesn't get things like understanding what's accurate or inaccurate the way humans do. It also can't feel emotions or read a room like we can. Because of this, AI can't totally take over for human decisions. This makes it necessary to put on our investigative hats and challenge the recency, relevancy, and accuracy of Gen AI outputs. For example, you can investigate data sources by first looking at the AI model citations or asking the model to provide a list of citations for you. Then reflect on questions like, when was the source originally published? Is the data up to date? Is the information in the output relevant to your inquiry and aimed at the correct audience? And is the information in the citation accurate? Or are there any errors that could impact the information's quality? You will also need to use critical thinking to detect bias in the outputs produced by Gen AI. As mentioned earlier, Gen AI reflects the cognitive biases of its creators and datasets. For instance, have you ever read a news article or piece of online content and thought to yourself, wow, the author of this content has presented the information in a way that's very one-sided? Even though it may not seem as obvious at first, Gen AI outputs can also contain biased one-sided, or even discriminatory content that it inherits from the data it is trained on. So in addition to investigating factors like recency, relevancy, and accuracy in outputs, you'll also need to be on the lookout for whether the output is potentially perpetuating bias or strongly supporting a certain viewpoint or side. In these situations, think about the people and processes that can help you. Reach out to your manager for support, have your peers review and provide feedback on your outputs, or better yet, enlist the help of a subject matter expert. After all, it's far easier to miss or mistake bias in an output if you are only looking at it from one perspective. Another thing to keep in mind when thinking about Gen AI is that it can and is being leveraged in many different ways. Gen AI has a large impact on work around the world, but the way companies are receiving and adopting this new technology is not the same. In fact, while some have fully embraced and invested in the use of Gen AI, others are more cautious to begin using it. This means that the way that AI is used and the way you should be using it at work will be dependent on your organization. In other words, Gen AI has limitless potential, but you'll need to identify the right instances to use it in order for it to be helpful and for it to make a meaningful difference in your role. Here, critical thinking comes back into play. When making decisions about how you're using Gen AI, ensure that you are being intentional and cautious about following your organization's policies and guidelines. Think of these policies and guidelines as your North Star. Following them will help you think critically about the best use case for Gen AI in your role. Make decisions about when to use Gen AI and share new uses with others. When deciding whether or not to use AI in a specific situation, you should also consider, does this use of Gen AI support you and your team's needs? How big of a priority is this use of Gen AI? And if there's a risk connected to this type of use, how does it compare to potential rewards? One way that I use Gen AI in my own work is in research, where I have to gather multiple different perspectives on a topic. I do this by asking Gen AI to generate a list of as many different perspectives as there are on a topic. This helps inform some of the initial scope of my research and invites me to explore further the viability of the different perspectives, as well as new understandings about the topic. When starting to select your own use case, think about how Gen AI can support your work and the tasks that you do more and less often. In all of my experience with using Gen AI, one thing I needed to get past was the idea that learning this tool would be a quick, one-and-done exercise. In reality, effectively navigating Gen AI takes time and practice. To avoid discouragement, create targeted outcomes, and develop innovative uses for Gen AI, we need to approach it with a learning mindset. In our busy lives, it's not always easy to find the time and opportunity to commit to the learning adventure that is Gen AI. This can result in us trying Gen AI only once, to be unsatisfied with their generated output, making us tempted to just write it off altogether. So if you've ever felt discouraged after entering a prompt and not receiving the response you hoped for, just know that you're not alone in this. The important thing is to keep experimenting, stay curious, and remember that trial and error is a normal part of the learning process for this technology. In many ways, Gen AI is still being understood. You'll need to try different prompts and question combinations to help you reach your desired output. You'll also need to be open to using different technologies as different paths to getting there. Try to find fun in the skill building process. Collaborate with your peers to share some quick wins for using Gen AI successfully. Make a game out of it or spend some time using it during informal team meetings or professional development sessions. Encourage working together with your colleagues by saying something like, hey, why don't we set up a shared file or a group chat where we can all swap tips and keep our info in one place. It'll be super easy for us to stay in the loop and help each other to improve our use of Gen AI. Throughout this video, we've talked about the key considerations involved in adopting Gen AI mindset. We've covered some of the benefits of Gen AI and explained how these must be weighed against potential issues. We have addressed strategies you can take to overcome these issues and reinforce the significance of selecting the right Gen AI uses. We also touched on how important it is to continue to practice learning about Gen AI and engage in the process of experimentation to avoid discouragement, build your skills, and collaborate with others. But if there's one key takeaway from our conversation, it's this: Gen AI is here to stay. Embrace it and approach it with a critical thinking lens. I'll leave you with a suggestion of how you can take the ideas we've discussed here and apply them in the real world. To unleash the potential of Gen AI, you need to reflect on your purpose. As Gen AI doesn't inherently have a purpose of its own, it requires people to direct it and guide it to accomplish any work. So think about your purpose and lean into the power of Gen AI to propel you to fulfill your purpose. Thank you so much for tuning in to this McLean & Company Learning on Demand video. And happy generating!